The rain hammered the windows of my Seattle apartment, a relentless drumbeat that matched the chaos in my chest. I stood frozen, staring at the text from Ethan, lost my place. "Can I crash at yours? Promise I'm no trouble." "No trouble," he said. But Ethan Miller was a walking storm, and I'd been caught in his orbit since we were kids. I hadn't seen him in 2 years, not since he moved to Portland for a construction job, and I stayed behind, piecing together a life as a graphic designer while hiding the truth I'd buried deep. I was in love with him. Ethan, my straight best friend, who'd never suspect the way my heart raced when he grinned or slung an arm around me like it was nothing. Now he was coming back, and I wasn't ready for the wreckage he'd bring. The doorbell buzzed, sharp and insistent. I opened the door, and there he was, 6 feet of broad shoulders, damp flannel clinging to his frame, a duffel bag slung over one arm. His hazel eyes met mine, and that familiar crooked smile hit me like a punch. "Noah," he said, voice rough from the road. "You're a lifesaver." I forced a laugh, stepping aside. "Yeah. Well, don't make me regret it." My apartment was smell: a couch, a coffee table, a TV on a stand I'd built from thrift store scraps. Ethan dropped his bag, shaking rain from his hair like a dog. He smelled like cedar and motor oil, a scent that dragged me back to high school summers when we'd sneak beers by the lake and talk about everything but the future. "Rough couple of months," he said, collapsing onto the couch. "Landlord screwed me over. Job's gone to hell. Figured I'd come back to Seattle. Start fresh." He looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes, something heavier than exhaustion. But then he leaned back, hands behind his head, and the moment was gone. I grabbed a couple of beers from the fridge, trying to steady myself. "You can stay as long as you need," I said, handing him one. Our fingers brushed, and I pulled back too fast, cursing myself for the heat creeping up my neck. Ethan didn't notice. He never did. We talked for hours, the rain a steady backdrop. He told me about the construction site accidents, the boss who stiffed him, the girlfriend who left when things got tough. I listened, nodding, while my mind screamed, "Tell him. Tell him now." But how do you tell your straight best friend you've loved him for a decade? How do you risk ruining the only person who's ever felt like home? By midnight, Ethan was sprawled across the couch, one arm dangling over the edge. I tossed a blanket over him, my fingers lingering too long near his shoulder. "Get some sleep, man," I whispered, retreating to my room. But sleep didn't come. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, imagining him just feet away, his steady breathing filling the silence. The next morning, I woke to a weight against my side. My eyes snapped open, and there he was, Ethan, curled against me on my bed, his arms slung across my chest. His breath was warm against my neck, and for one reckless second, I let myself believe this was real. Then panic hit. How the hell had he ended up here? I froze, heart hammering. His face was peaceful, lashes casting shadows on his cheeks. I wanted to stay there forever, but dread clawed at me. If he woke up like this, what would he think? What would he say? I slid out from under his arm, careful not to wake him, and stumbled to the kitchen, gripping the counter like it could anchor me. Ethan stirred an hour later, shuffling out in a wrinkled t-shirt, oblivious to the chaos he'd caused. "Morning," he mumbled, grabbing coffee. "Guess I wandered in here last night. Couch was too small. Hope that's cool." Yeah, I managed, my voice tight. "No big deal." But it was. It was a very big deal. That day, Ethan settled in like he'd never left. He fixed my leaky faucet, teased me about my art projects, and cooked a terrible breakfast that we laughed through anyway. It was so easy, so normal, but every moment felt like walking a tightrope. I caught myself watching him too long, memorizing the way his hands moved, the way his laugh filled the room. By night, he insisted on taking the couch again. "I'm not kicking you out of your bed, Noah," he said, grinning. "I'll survive." But I barely did. Lying alone, I replayed the morning, his arm, his warmth, the impossible hope it sparked. I was falling harder, and there was no safety net. The next week blurred by in a haze of tension and unspoken truths. Ethan was everywhere, his boots by the door, his jacket on my chair, his voice in my dreams. I tried to keep my distance, but he'd pull me back with a joke or a story, like he knew I was slipping away. One night, he caught me sketching him on my tablet, his profile sharp against the glow of the TV. "You're good, man," he said, leaning over my shoulder. His breath grazed my ear, and I nearly dropped the stylus. "Why don't you ever show me this stuff?" "Because it's all you." I wanted to scream. Instead, I shrugged. "Just practice." He looked at me then, longer than he should have, and my heart stopped. "You're different lately," he said, voice low. "Something's up with you." I swallowed hard, the truth clawing at my throat. "I'm fine." I lied. But I wasn't. And I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending. The air in my apartment felt heavier each day, like the weight of my secret was pressing down on every inch of the place. Ethan had been crashing on my couch for a week now, and every moment with him was a tightrope walk between joy and torment. His presence was a drug, thrilling, addictive, and dangerous as hell. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way his eyes softened when he talked about his mom. The way his fingers tapped a rhythm on his knee when he was nervous. Every detail carved itself into me, making it harder to pretend I was just his friend. But Ethan, he was oblivious, cracking jokes and filling my quiet life with his chaos, like he'd always done. One evening, we were sprawled on the floor, surrounded by takeout boxes, watching some terrible action movie. The Seattle skyline glittered through the window, a backdrop to the tension coiling in my gut. Ethan nudged my shoulder, laughing. "You're zoning out, Noah. What's got you so deep in thought?" "You," I thought, but I just shrugged. "Long day." He didn't buy it. He never did when I tried to dodge him. "Bullshit," he said, sitting up. "You've been weird all week. Spill it." My heart lurched. I could have told him, then poured out the truth I'd carried since we were 16, sneaking out to watch the stars on his dad's truck. But the word stuck, heavy and sharp, like glass in my throat. "It's nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Just work stress." He studied me, his gaze piercing. For a second, I thought he'd push harder, but he just grabbed another slice of pizza. "All right, but I'm here. Yeah. Don't shut me out." The irony burned. He was the one person I could never fully let in. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words, his look, the way his knee had brushed mine on the floor. Around 2 a.m., I heard the floorboards creak. Ethan stood in my doorway, silhouetted against the hall light. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, voice rough. I sat up, pulse racing. "Yeah. What's up?" He hesitated, then crossed the room and sat on the edge of my bed. I don't know. Man. Feels like we're not connecting like we used to. You're distant. My stomach twisted. I'm right here, I said, but it felt like a lie. I was a million miles away, trapped in a prison of my own making. He ran a hand through his hair. Frustration etched into his face. I know I messed up. Showing up like this. Crashing your life. If it's too much, just say it. No. I said too quickly. It's not that. I want you here. Too much. My heart screamed. He looked at me, and the air shifted, charged with something I couldn't name. Good, he said softly. Because I don't know what I'd do without you. The words hit like a tidal wave. I wanted to grab him, to tell him everything. To hell with the consequences. But fear won, as it always did. I just nodded, and he eventually wandered back to the couch. The next day, Ethan insisted on dragging me to Pike Place Market. You need to get out of that cave, he said, tossing me my jacket. The market was alive, vendors shouting. The smell of fresh fish and coffee thick in the air. Ethan was in his element, charming a flower vendor into giving him a free daisy, which he tucked behind my ear with a grin. Suits you, he said, and my face burned. We wandered for hours, laughing like we were kids again. For a while, I forgot the weight I carried. But then we passed a couple, two guys holding hands, stealing a kiss by a fruit stand. Ethan's step faltered, just for a second, and my heart sank. I braced for a joke, a comment, something to remind me of the line between us. But he just kept walking, quieter now. You okay? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Yeah, he said, but his jaw was tight. Just thinking. I didn't push. I couldn't. But the moment stayed with me. A crack in the facade I'd built around my hope. That night, he cooked dinner-burnt spaghetti. Because Ethan's culinary skills were a disaster. We laughed until my sides hurt. But the tension lingered. After we cleaned up, he leaned against the counter, watching me. You ever think about the future, Noah? Like, who you'll end up with? My heart stopped. Sometimes, I said carefully. You. He shrugged, but his eyes didn't leave mine. Used to think I had it figured out. Now, I'm not so sure. The room felt too small, the air too thin. I wanted to ask what he meant, to dig into that crack in his armor. But my phone buzzed, shattering the moment. A client email, urgent and annoying. I muttered an apology and stepped away. But the question hung between us, unanswered. By the end of the week, I was unraveling. Ethan's presence was a constant reminder of what I couldn't have. Every touch, every laugh, every glance was a knife twisting deeper. I started staying late at my freelance gigs, hoping distance would dull the ache. But Ethan noticed. He always did. One night, he cornered me as I came home, his expression stormy. You're avoiding me, he said, blocking the doorway. What the hell? Noah. Did I do something? No. I lied, my voice shaking. I'm just busy. Bullshit. He snapped, stepping closer. You're my best friend. I know when you're lying. I wanted to scream, to shove him away, to pull him closer. Instead, I turned and walked to the window, staring at the rain-slicked street below. I can't do this, I whispered, more to myself than to him. Do what? he asked, his voice softer now. Closer. I felt his hand on my shoulder, and it took everything not to lean into it. I closed my eyes, the truth clawing its way out. You wouldn't understand, I said, and the words felt like a confession. The silence after my words was deafening, broken only by the steady drip of rain outside. Ethan's hand lingered on my shoulder, warm and heavy, and I hated how much I wanted to turn and face him. But I stayed rooted, staring at the blurred city lights, afraid one wrong move would shatter everything. Try me, he said, his voice low but firm. Make me understand. Noah. My throat tightened. I'd spent years building walls to keep this moment at bay, but they were crumbling now, brick by brick. It's not that simple, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You don't know what it's like to want something you can't have. He stepped closer, his breath brushing my neck. What do you want? The question was a grenade, and I was holding the pin. I turned, finally meeting his eyes, and the intensity there nearly broke me. Ethan, don't, I said, stepping back. You don't get it. Then explain it. His voice rose, frustration spilling over. You're shutting me out, and I hate it. We've always been straight with each other. What's changed? Everything. I wanted to scream. Instead, I shook my head, my chest aching. I can't. Not with you. His face fell, and for a moment, I thought he'd walk away. But then he grabbed my arm. Not hard, but enough to stop me. Noah, you're scaring me. Whatever it is, just say it. I'm not going anywhere. The sincerity in his voice was a knife. I pulled away, pacing the small living room, my hand shaking. You don't know what you're asking, I said. If I tell you, it changes everything. And I can't lose you. Lose me? He laughed, but it was hollow. You're the one pushing me away. I stopped, my back to him, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. The truth was there, clawing at my lips, but fear held it back. What if he laughed? What if he left? What if he looked at me with disgust? But then he spoke, softer now. Noah, please. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. Together. I turned, and the sight of him standing there, eyes wide with worry, hands outstretched, broke something in me. I'm gay, I blurted, the words raw and jagged. And I've been in love with you since we were 16. The room went still. Ethan's face froze, his eyes searching mine like he was waiting for a punchline. But I kept going. The dam broken. Every day you're here. It's killing me. Because I know you're straight. And I know you'll never feel the same. But I can't stop. I've tried. Ethan. I've tried so hard. He didn't move. Didn't speak. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, and I felt my heart crack. Say something, I whispered, tears burning my eyes. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his hands dropping to his sides. Noah. He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, I said, bitterness creeping in. I made sure of it. He took a step toward me, then stopped, like he wasn't sure what to do with himself. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was scared. I snapped, my voice breaking. You're my best friend. You're everything. And I couldn't risk you looking at me like I'm some stranger. He flinched, and I hated myself for it. You're not a stranger. He said quietly, "You're Noah. You'll always be Noah." But the way he said it, so careful, so guarded, told me everything. He didn't feel the same. He couldn't. I turned away, wiping my eyes. Just forget it. You can stay, but I need space. Noah, wait. I can't, I said, heading for my room. Not tonight. I shut the door, leaning against it, my chest heaving. The truth was out, and it felt like I'd ripped my own heart open. I heard him pace outside, then the creak of the couch as he sat. Neither of us slept that night. The next morning, Ethan was quieter than usual. His usual energy dimmed. He made coffee, set a mug in front of me, but didn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for making you feel like you couldn't tell me." "It's not your fault," I said, staring at the table. "It's mine." "No, it's not." He sat across from me, his voice firm. "You're my best friend, Noah. That hasn't changed. I just need time to process." I nodded, but the words felt hollow. Time wouldn't change the fact that I'd bared my soul, and he couldn't give me what I wanted. The next few days were a careful dance. We talked, but it was surface-level work. Weather. Anything but the truth hanging between us. Ethan didn't leave, but he didn't crowd me either. I caught him watching me sometimes, his expression unreadable, and it drove me crazy. One night, he came home late from a job interview, his flannel damp from the rain. "Got the job," he said, a small smile breaking through. "Construction site downtown. I can start saving. Get my own place soon." "That's great," I said, but my heart sank. Him leaving was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? To stop the torture of having him so close. But the thought of him gone felt worse. He sat on the couch, closer than he'd been in days. "Noah, I've been thinking about what you said." My stomach dropped. "Ethan, don't. No. Let me finish." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. I've never thought about this before. But I care about you. More than anyone. And I don't want to lose you either." His words were a lifeline, but they weren't enough. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I don't know," he admitted, his eyes meeting mine. "But I'm trying to figure it out." For the first time since my confession, I felt a flicker of hope. But hope was dangerous, and I wasn't sure I could survive it breaking again. Hope is a cruel thing when it's tethered to someone who can't give you what you need. Ethan's words, "I am trying to figure it out," echoed in my head, but they didn't erase the ache in my chest. We were stuck in this limbo, tiptoeing around the truth I'd laid bare. And every day felt like a countdown to something breaking. Ethan started his new job, leaving early and coming back late. His hands calloused and his smile tired but genuine. I buried myself in freelance work, sketching logos and tweaking designs until my eyes burned. Anything to keep my mind off him. But he was everywhere, his boots by the door, his coffee mug on the counter, the faint cedar scent that lingered in the air. One evening, I came home to find him on the couch, a beer in hand, staring at the TV but not really watching. "Rough day?" I asked, dropping my bag. He shrugged, his eyes distant. "Just thinking." I wanted to press, to ask what was eating at him, but I didn't trust myself to handle the answer. Instead, I grabbed a beer and sat beside him, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. We'd always been good at this, sitting together, not needing words. But now, every quiet moment felt like a battlefield. You ever feel like you're running from something? He asked suddenly, his voice low. I glanced at him, my pulse quickening. All the time. He turned to me, his hazel eyes catching the dim light. What are you running from? Noah. The question hit too close. You know what? I said, looking away. Don't make me say it again. He didn't push, but he didn't look away either. I'm not running, he said quietly. Not from you. My heart stuttered, but I didn't let myself believe it. You don't have to say that, I said. I get it. You're straight. You don't need to make this okay for me. He frowned, setting his beard down. You think that's what this is? Me trying to make you feel better. Isn't it? My voice was sharper than I meant. But I was tired of hoping. Tired of hurting. No, he said, his tone matching mine. I'm trying to figure out what the hell I'm feeling. Noah. Because ever since you told me, I can't stop thinking about it. About you. The room spun. I gripped my bottle. Afraid to move. Afraid to breathe. What does that mean? I asked, echoing my question from days ago. He leaned closer, his knee brushing mine. I don't know. But when you said you loved me, it didn't scare me. It should have. Right. But it didn't. I stared at him, searching for a lie. A joke. Anything to protect myself. But all I saw was Ethan raw. Confused. And painfully honest. You're not gay? I said. More to myself than to him. I know, he said, his voice barely audible. But I don't think I'm as straight as I thought either. The words hung between us, fragile and electric. I wanted to grab them, to hold on to them. But fear kept me frozen. Ethan, don't say that unless you mean it. I don't know what I mean yet, he admitted, his eyes locked on mine. But I know I don't want to lose you. And I know I've been feeling something. For a while. My heart was a war drum, pounding against my ribs. I wanted to ask what something meant, to demand answers. But the vulnerability in his face stopped me. He was as lost as I was. And for the first time, I saw it. He was trying. The next few days were a blur of cautious hope. Ethan didn't pull away, but he didn't push forward either. We fell back into our rhythm, cooking together, laughing over dumb TV shows, but there was a new undercurrent. A quiet intensity in the way he looked at me, the way his hand lingered when he passed me a plate. One night, we went to a bar downtown, a crowded place with neon lights and sticky floors. Ethan was in a good mood, joking with the bartender, buying me a drink. But when a guy across the bar smiled at me, Ethan's mood shifted. He didn't say anything, but his jaw tightened, his hand gripping his glass a little too hard. Jealous, I teased, half joking, testing the waters. He shot me a look, half smirking, half serious. Maybe. My breath caught. It was the closest he'd come to admitting anything, and it set my nerves on fire. We left soon after, walking back through the rain-soaked streets. He was quieter than usual, his hands shoved in his pockets. But he stayed close, our shoulders brushing. When we got home, he stopped me in the hallway, his hand on my arm. Noah, he said, his voice rough. I'm trying. I really am. But it's new. And I don't want to screw it up. You won't, I said, my voice softer than I meant. Just be honest with me. He nodded, his eyes searching mine. Then, Slowly, he leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. It wasn't a kiss, but it was something intimate, terrifying, and real. My heart raced, but I didn't pull away. For the first time, I let myself believe he might meet me halfway. But the next morning, doubt crept back in. What if he was just confused? What if this was pity, or curiosity, or some fleeting phase? I couldn't shake the fear that I was setting myself up for heartbreak. That night, Ethan came home with a small canvas. One of my old sketches he'd found in a closet. It was a drawing of us as kids, sitting by the lake, his arm around me. "You kept this," he said, holding it up. "Yeah," I admitted, my face burning. Couldn't throw it out. He looked at it for a long time, then at me. "I'm glad you didn't," he said softly. "I'm glad you're you, Noah." The words were simple, but they cracked me open. I didn't know what was coming, but for the first time, I wasn't running from it. The moment Ethan rested his forehead against mine lingered like a bruised tender. Vivid, impossible to ignore. I woke the next morning with it replaying in my head. His words looping, "I'm trying." But trying wasn't a promise. And I was still caught between hope and fear, teetering on the edge of something I couldn't name. Ethan was already gone when I got up, off to his construction job, leaving behind a scrawled note, "Coffee's on. See you tonight." I stared at it, tracing the messy slant of his handwriting, wondering how something so small could feel so heavy. Work dragged. I sat in a coffee shop, sketching for a client. But my mind was on Ethan, his confession, his confusion, the way his touch had felt like a spark. By the time I got home, my nerves were frayed, and the sight of him on the couch, still in his work boots, didn't help. "Hey," he said, looking up from his phone. His smile was cautious, like he was testing the air between us. "Hey," I echoed, dropping my bag. "Good day?" He shrugged. "Long. You?" "Same." I hesitated, then sat beside him, closer than I'd dared in days. The silence wasn't heavy, but it was charged, like the air before a storm. He set his phone down, turning to face me. "Noah, I've been thinking." My heart skipped. "Yeah?" "About what I said. About us." He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit I'd memorized years ago. "I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I don't want to keep you at arm's length. Not anymore." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "What are you saying, Ethan?" He looked at me, his eyes raw and unguarded. "I'm saying I've never felt like this before. Not with anyone. And it's freaking me out. But I think I want to try. With you." The world tilted. I stared at him, waiting for the catch, the joke, the retraction. But he just held my gaze, steady and sure. "You mean that?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Yeah," he said, a small smile breaking through. "I do." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. Instead, I reached for his hand, my fingers trembling as they brushed his. He didn't pull away. He laced his fingers with mine, and for a moment, we just sat there, the weight of years falling away. But doubt lingered. That night, as we watched a movie, his arm around my shoulders, I couldn't shake the fear that this was temporary. Ethan was new to this, grappling with feelings he'd never expected. What if he woke up tomorrow and changed his mind? The next day, I met my friend Lila at a diner. She'd known me since college, Knew about my feelings for Ethan before I'd even admitted them to myself. Over greasy fries, I spilled everything his confession. Our moment. My fear. He's trying. Noah, she said, her eyes kind but firm. That's more than most people would do. But you've got to protect yourself too. Make sure he's in this for real. I know, I said, but the thought of losing him again made my chest ache. When I got home, Ethan was cooking actual edible food this time. A stir-fry that smelled like heaven. Figured I owed you after the spaghetti disaster, he said, grinning. I laughed, but it was strained. He noticed, setting down the spatula. What's wrong? I hesitated, then let it out. I'm scared. Ethan. It's everything I've wanted. But I don't know if you're ready. If you're sure. His face softened, but he didn't look away. I'm not gonna lie. Noah. This is new. And yeah, it's scary. But I'm not playing around. I want this. I want you. The words hit like a wave, washing away some of the doubt. But not all. What if you change your mind? I asked, my voice small. He stepped closer, his hand finding mine. Then we figure it out. Together. But I'm not going anywhere. I wanted to believe him. God. I did. And when he pulled me into a hug, his arms steady and warm, I let myself sink into it. Just for a moment. The next week was a whirlwind. Ethan was open in ways I hadn't expected. Small touches. Lingering looks. A kiss on my forehead one night that left me breathless. But there were moments of hesitation too. Times when he'd pull back. His eyes clouded with something I couldn't read. One night, we went to a rooftop bar with Lila and some friends. The city sparkled below, and Ethan was relaxed, his arm around me like it was the most natural thing. But when Lila's friend asked how long we'd been together, Ethan froze, his arm stiffening. We're figuring it out, he said, and my stomach sank. Later, in the cab home, I couldn't hold it in. You hesitated, I said, staring out the window. When they asked about us. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I didn't mean to. It's just new. People asking questions, assuming things. I'm not used to it. And I am. I snapped, hurt spilling over. I've been dealing with this my whole life. Ethan, if you're not ready for people to know, then what are we doing? He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I'm trying. Noah, he said, his voice raw. I just need time. Time for what? I asked, my throat tight. To decide if you're okay with this. With me. No, he said, his voice breaking. To figure out how to be the guy you deserve. The cab fell silent, the city lights blurring past. I wanted to believe him, but the doubt was a shadow I couldn't shake. And as we walked into the apartment, his hand brushing mine, I wondered if love was enough to bridge the gap between us. The tension between us didn't fade overnight. Ethan's words in the cab to figure out how to be the guy you deserve stayed with me. Both a comfort and a weight. I wanted to trust him, to believe he was all in. But every hesitation, every flicker of doubt in his eyes, reminded me how fragile this was. We fell into a rhythm, though, a tentative dance of closeness and caution. Mornings were soft coffee shared in silence, his hand brushing mine as he passed the sugar. Evenings were harder, when the world outside my apartment crept in, bringing questions neither of us was ready to answer. One Saturday, Ethan suggested a hike in the mountains outside Seattle. We need to get out, he said, tossing me a water bottle. Clear our heads. The trail was steep, the air crisp with pine and earth. Ethan led the way, his confidence pulling me along, just like when we were kids exploring the woods behind his house. At the summit, we sat on a rocky outcrop, the city a distant shimmer below. You ever think about how we got here? He asked, his voice quiet. All those years. And now, this. I glanced at him, his profile sharp against the sky. Yeah, I said. Feels like a lifetime. He turned to me, his eyes searching. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. How you felt? My chest tightened. You couldn't have known. I didn't let you. He shook his head. I should have. You're the most important person in my life. Noah. Always have been. The words were a balm, but they didn't erase the fear. Then why does it feel like you're still holding back? I asked, my voice barely steady. He looked away, his jaw tight. It's not you. It's everyone else. My family. My old friends. They've got expectations. And I don't know how to tell them I'm falling for a guy. The admission hit hard, falling for a guy. For me. But the weight of his words, the fear of his world rejecting him, mirrored my own. I get it, I said softly. I've been there. It's terrifying. He met my eyes, a small smile breaking through. How'd you do it? Tell the world who you are. I laughed, bitter and soft. I didn't have a choice. It was either live a lie or lose people. I lost some, but the ones who stayed like you, they're worth it. He reached for my hand, his grip firm. I don't want to lose you, he said. I'm trying to be brave. Noah. For you. I squeezed his hand, my heart caught between hope and dread. You don't have to be brave alone, I said. We can do this together. The hike back was quieter, but lighter, like we'd left some of the weight at the summit. That night, we cooked together, his shoulder brushing mine as we chopped vegetables. When he kissed my cheek, quick and shy, I felt the world shift. But the outside world didn't stop pressing in. A few days later, Ethan's phone buzzed with a call from his dad. I watched his face tighten as he answered. His voice clipped. Yeah, I'm staying with Noah. It's temporary. When he hung up, I raised an eyebrow. Temporary. He sighed, tossing his phone on the couch. He's asking questions. Wants to know why I'm not with a girl. Why I'm wasting time here. I felt a pang. Not just for him, but for us. What did you tell him? Nothing yet, he said, his eyes avoiding mine. But I will. I just need to figure out how. The words stung, but I nodded. I'm here, I said, echoing his promise from weeks ago. That weekend, we went to a friend's art gallery opening. Lila was there, her eyes sharp as she watched us navigate the crowd. Ethan stayed close, his hand brushing mine, but he didn't hold it. When a stranger asked if we were a couple, he laughed it off, saying, "Nah, just buddies." The words cut deeper than I expected. In the car, I couldn't hold it in. Buddies, I said, my voice sharp. Is that what we are? He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. I panicked. Okay. I didn't know what to say. Then say the truth, I snapped. Or don't say anything at all. He pulled over, his breath uneven. I'm trying. Noah. But this isn't easy. I'm not like you. I haven't had years to figure this out. And I have. I shot back. You think this is easy for me? Loving you. Knowing you might never be ready. He stared at me, his eyes wide. You still love me? The question stopped me cold. I hadn't said it since that night. Hadn't dared. But it was still true. Raw and undeniable. Yeah, I said, my voice breaking. I do. He reached for me, his hand cupping my face. I'm falling for you. Noah. I am. I need you to be patient. I leaned into his touch, tears stinging my eyes. I'm trying, I whispered. But it hurts. He pulled me into a hug, his arms tight around me. I know, he said. I'm sorry. We stayed like that, parked on a quiet street, the city humming around us. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for now, it was enough. The weeks that followed were a fragile balance of hope and uncertainty. Ethan was trying. I could see it in the way he reached for me, the way he stayed close even when the world pressed in. But the shadow of his hesitation lingered, a reminder that love wasn't enough on its own. One morning, I woke to find him in my bed again, his arm draped over me like it had that first night. This time, I didn't panic. I lay there, memorizing the rise and fall of his chest, the warmth of his skin against mine. When he stirred, his eyes met mine, and he smiled a soft, sleepy smile that made my heart ache. Morning, he murmured, his voice rough. Morning, I said, my voice just as soft. You're in my bed again. He chuckled, not moving his arm. Guess I got lost. I wanted to stay there forever, but reality crept in. You've got work, I said, sliding out of bed. He groaned but followed, stealing a sip of my coffee as we got ready. It was domestic, easy, and for a moment, I let myself imagine a future like this. But then his phone buzzed, and his face darkened. Another call from his dad. This time, he didn't answer. I'll deal with it later, he said, but the tension in his shoulders told me it wasn't that simple. That evening, we went to a concert at a small venue downtown. The music was loud, the crowd alive, and Ethan seemed lighter, his arm around me as we swayed to the beat. For a few hours, it was just us, no doubts, no expectations. But on the walk home, he got quiet again. My dad's coming to town, he said finally. Wants to see me. Talk about my plans. My stomach twisted. You gonna tell him? About us? He hesitated, and that was answer enough. I want to, he said. But he's old school. You know how he is. I did. Ethan's dad was a hard man, all sharp edges and rigid expectations. I'd seen the way he talked about real men, the way he dismissed anything that didn't fit his worldview. You don't have to tell him yet, I said, though it hurt to say it. But you can't hide forever. I know, he said, his voice low. I just don't want to lose him. I stopped walking, turning to face him. And I don't want to lose you. But I can't be your secret, Ethan. Not forever. He looked at me, his eyes raw. You're not a secret. You're everything. The words hit hard, but they didn't erase the fear. Then prove it, I said, my voice shaking. Not to me. To yourself. He nodded, pulling me into a hug. I will, he whispered. I promise. The next day, his dad arrived. Ethan was a mess, pacing the apartment, his hands fidgeting. I stayed out of the way, working in my room, but I could hear their voices through the walls, his dad's gruff tone, Ethan's careful responses. When they left for dinner, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I wanted Ethan to be honest, to claim this part of himself, but I knew what it could cost him. He came back late, his face pale. How'd it go? I asked, my heart in my throat. He sank onto the couch, rubbing his face. I told him. About us. My breath caught. And he didn't take it well, he said, his voice hollow. Said some things. About me. About you. Told me to fix myself or not bother coming home. I sat beside him, my hand on his knee. I'm sorry, Ethan. He shook his head, tears in his eyes. I'm not. It hurt. But I feel free. For the first time. I wasn't pretending. I pulled him into a hug, his head resting against my shoulder. I'm proud of you, I whispered. He clung to me, his voice muffled. I love you, Noah. The words stopped my heart. I'd waited years to hear them, and now they were real, raw, and heavy with everything we'd been through. I love you too, I said, my voice breaking. We stayed like that, wrapped in each other, the world outside fading away. It wasn't perfect. His dad's rejection hung over us, and I knew there'd be more battles ahead. But in that moment, we were enough. The next morning, Ethan was different, lighter, like a weight had lifted. He kissed me before leaving for work. A real kiss, soft and sure. We're gonna be okay, he said, and I believed him. But life doesn't let you rest. A week later, I got a call from a client offering a big project in New York. It was a dream job, good money, a chance to make a name for myself. But it meant leaving Seattle, leaving Ethan. I told him that night, expecting him to brush it off, to say we'd figure it out. Instead, he went quiet, his face unreadable. You should take it, he said finally. It's what you've always wanted. My heart sank. What about us? He looked at me, his eyes steady. We'll make it work. I'm not letting you go, Noah. The words were a promise, but they didn't erase the fear. New York was a world away, and we were just starting to find our footing. But as he pulled me close, his arms strong and sure, I let myself believe we could survive anything. The decision to take the New York job hung over us like a storm cloud, heavy with possibility and risk. Ethan's promise, I am not letting you go, as a lifeline. But it didn't erase the distance we were about to face. Seattle was our home, the backdrop to every moment that had brought us here. And leaving it felt like leaving a piece of us behind. We spent the next week making plans. I'd fly out in a month, giving me time to wrap up local projects. Ethan would stay in Seattle, working his construction job, saving up to visit. Long distance wasn't ideal, but we'd survived worse. Or so I told myself. One night, we sat on the couch, my laptop open to apartment listings in New York. Ethan leaned against me, his chin on my shoulder. You're gonna love it, he said, pointing to a tiny studio in Brooklyn. You'll be all artsy, drinking overpriced coffee, sketching the skyline. I laughed, but it was strained. And you'll be here, swinging a hammer, charming the neighbors. He grinned, but his eyes were serious. I'll come visit. Soon as I can. I nodded, but the fear lingered. What if distance changed us? What if he realized he wasn't ready for this life? For me. The days slipped by too fast. We made the most of them late-night walks through Pike Place. Coffee runs. Quiet moments on the couch where he'd hold my hand like it was the most natural thing. But the closer my departure got, the heavier the air felt. The night before my flight, Ethan cooked dinner, his best attempt yet. A roast chicken that was only slightly overdone. We ate in silence, the weight of tomorrow pressing down. After, we sat on the balcony, the city lights stretching out below. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice barely audible. He turned to me, his hand finding mine. Me too. But we're tougher than this. Noah. We've made it through worse. I wanted to believe him, but the doubt was a knot in my chest. What if you change your mind? About us? He shook his head, his grip tightening. I won't. I love you. That's not going anywhere. The words were a balm, but they didn't erase the fear. I leaned into him, his arms wrapping around me. And for a moment, I let myself believe we'd be okay. The next morning, he drove me to the airport. The ride was quiet, the radio filling the silence with some soft indie song. At the terminal, he pulled me into a hug, his lips brushing my forehead. Call me when you land, he said, his voice rough. I will. I promised, my throat tight. He kissed me then, slow and deep, right there in the drop-off lane. It was the first time he'd kissed me in public. No hesitation, no fear. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. Go be amazing, Noah. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes, and walked away before I could change my mind. New York was a whirlwind, crowded, loud, alive in a way Seattle never was. The job was demanding, but it lit a fire in me, pushing my art to new places. But every night, I'd call Ethan, his voice grounding me across the miles. He'd tell me about his day, the guys at work, the way the city felt empty without me. One night, he surprised me with a video call, his face filling my screen. Check your email, he said, grinning. I opened it to find a plane ticket, Ethan. Coming to New York in 2 weeks. You didn't, I said, my heart racing. I did, he said. Told you I'm not letting you go. When he arrived, I met him at JFK, my heart pounding as I scanned the crowd. Then there he was, duffel bag over his shoulder, that crooked smile lighting up his face. I ran to him, and he caught me in a hug, lifting me off the ground. Missed you, he whispered, his lips against my ear. Missed you more, I said, and we laughed, the distance melting away. That weekend, we explored the city, Brooklyn, Central Park, a tiny diner with the best pancakes. Ethan held my hand in public. No hesitation, no fear. When we kissed on a crowded subway platform, I felt the world shift. This was real. This was us. Back in my tiny apartment, we lay on my bed, his arms around me, the city humming outside. I'm proud of you, he said, his voice soft. For chasing this. For being you. I turned to face him, my hand on his chest. And I'm proud of you. For being brave. He smiled, kissing me gently. We're gonna be okay, Noah. Wherever we are. And in that moment, I believed him. Love wasn't perfect, and neither were we. But it was enough. We'd built something real, something worth fighting for. And no distance, no fear, could take that away. As I fell asleep in his arms, the weight of years-soft secrets, of pain, of hope settled into something new, certainty. We weren't just friends anymore. We were home.